Tropical Storm Dawn is now more likely to develop within the next 7 days. Take a look at the latest run of the GFS model. We do see that as of right now, it's relatively quiet when it comes to convective activity over the northern Atlantic. We do have 2 tropical waves moving through the main development region. However, they're unlikely to develop into a tropical cyclone due to the fact that it's dealing with plenty of wind shear. There is an upper level low located right around this area, so it's unlikely to develop, and it seems like the this specific tropical wave is going to move a little bit too far south for the Coriolis effect to have as big of an impact to enhance the convection around the center of circulation. However, if we were to shift our focus a little bit further northward, we do see that a low pressure system develops right around the Wednesday timeframe just to the east of Bermuda, and this low pressure system could potentially become Tropical Storm Dawn within the very near future. We're going to see a blocking ridge that's going to prevent this storm from being able to move to the east at a very quick rate. So this storm is expected to linger over sea surface temperatures that are close to, if not slightly above 80 degrees. And we see that this low pressure system will become quite formidable. The pressure will drop down to 1,000 millibars, and this could be considered tropical storm status by the time we approach the Friday time frame based on what the GFS model is stating. The National Hurricane Center is giving this a moderate chance of developing, so there is a pretty good chance this actually does become a tropical storm, and it's gonna definitely need some baroclinic influences to help this storm. So this storm system might not necessarily be fully tropical. It's definitely gonna need some instability to enhance the convection for the wind speed to increase along the surface. So we're definitely going to need to wait and see how much of an effect the instability will have on the storm system, because if the National Hurricane Center detects that there's going to be a little bit too much cold air entraining the storm, and this convection is going to be induced more so by the cold air rather than the warm sea surface temperatures over this area, then this might not be considered a tropical entity at all, even if the wind speed is close to, if not over, tropical storm force status, because it isn't this storm system wouldn't develop in a tropical in a sort of a tropical way where the sea surface temperatures would induce the convection rather than the instability. So it's going to be very interesting to see. However, whether this is subtropical, a tropical storm, or not a tropical storm at all, the good news is that this is unlikely to impact any land directly, at least within the foreseeable future. Of course, it's likely that this will eventually affect Europe in the more long-term future, but it likely won't maintain its strength as it approaches Europe once the wind shear just becomes a little bit too strong. But it's at least something to keep in mind that we have a good possibility of Tropical Storm Dawn, and maybe in Bermuda and portions of eastern Canada, you could maybe see an enhanced risk of high surf associated with this tropical storm. So you need to watch out for that. Small possibility of rip currents. I don't think this storm will be strong enough to bring a major rip current threat, but definitely be aware of that if you're along the shore. Now, shifting our focus further southward to the Caribbean as well as the main development region. So in terms of the next few tropical waves moving through, so the areas that I'm taking a close look at over the next several days and potentially weeks is this area of the Caribbean, where there's going to be a continuous stream of convective activity moving towards the northeast. And we see that the GFS model does develop some well-defined low pressure systems in this area, such as right here, where by the Sunday timeframe, there is just enough convection for the GFS model to identify a low-level center just off the coast of Panama. So there's still a lot of days to iron out this forecast. If this could become a tropical entity, of course, it's going to be difficult if it's going to hug the coast like this. It won't have a lot of time over water if it's going to interact with the Central American coast like this. However, it's always good to keep in mind, and if we were to look into the more long-term future, we see that the GFS model does want to bring close to a tropical entity towards the Gulf of Mexico by the time we approach the late portion of July, but it is very far out in the future, so definitely take this with a huge grain of salt. Don't it's pretty much an educated guess at this point. But this area right here, we're going to see a continuous stream of convective activity move through. So we're at least going to be aware of this area, but I won't say there's necessarily any threat as of right now of a tropical storm developing in the near future in this area, mainly because the land interaction is too much for a lot of this moisture to handle, as well as the fact that the wind shear is very strong. Let me show you guys that right now. So here's a forecasted wind shear from the latest run of the GFS model over the next several days. And they're going to clearly see why there isn't many threats of tropical cyclone development in the northern Atlantic outside of this low pressure system that's going to move into the open Atlantic. So continuing to move forward, we see that the wind shear will remain strong right over the Caribbean. So any tropical waves moving through into the Caribbean will have a difficult time trying to create organized and well consolidated center of circulation along the surface. So it's unlikely that many tropical waves, at least for the foreseeable future, will end up developing into a tropical storm. The only way it could is if we were to see the tropical waves move a little bit further northward and enter this area where the wind shear is very light and where the Coriolis effect would have a bigger impact when it comes to the rotation around the center of circulation, which would help consolidate all the air molecules towards the low pressure system, as well as create a more closed center of circulation. And we aren't seeing that right here because most of the tropical waves are going to move a little bit too far south, and by the time they approach the Caribbean, the wind shear is going to be too strong. We have an upper level low located in this area. We're going to need to see that upper level low move a lot further northward before we can make the before we can say confidently that the wind shear will improve in the Caribbean and the main development region for tropical storm development to be more likely. We do see that the wind shear does reduce over this area, and the wind shear over this potential tropical storm dawn will be relatively strong, which will be another inhibiting factor, as well as the fact that the sea surface temperatures might not necessarily be at the 80-degree threshold. It might be over sea surface temperatures which are closer to the high 70s, which I'll show you guys in the the sea surface temperature map. But it's going to deal with stronger wind shear, so it's definitely going to need some help when it comes to instability and the cooler air mass just to the north of it for this to strengthen. But moving back southward, we see the wind shear is quite strong, so it's going to be difficult for much tropical cyclones to develop under hostile conditions like this. The main development region is, at least this area, is relatively light when it comes to wind shear, but the tropical waves moving through this area will encounter another problem, which will be the amount of ridging over this area, which will force the storms too far southward. Now, moving forward with the forecast, we do see that the wind shear will remain quite strong, so definitely make sure to keep that in mind. And it's unlikely we're going to see tropical storms develop within the near future thanks to this wind shear. Another thing that will be an inhibiting factor is the amount of Saharan dust that's going to be over the main development region over the next several days. Since the ridge is a lot further southward, we're going to see a lot more of that Saharan dust moves further southward into the main development region and the Caribbean. So that's definitely going to inhibit tropical cyclone development because that'll create a temperature inversion in the mid-levels, since the Saharan dust is a lot warmer than the warm and moist air mass along the surface. That means that the moist air mass will sink because it's essentially cooler than the Saharan dust that's in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. And we all know that a cooler air mass would sink when it's right in the middle of a warmer air mass. And in a scenario like this, the surface level air mass, which is very moist and has all that latent heat, will sink because the Saharan dust is just much warmer, and that's gonna definitely inhibit enough of an upward motion and convective activity from occurring for a high chance of tropical cyclone development to occur in the southern portion of the northern Atlantic. Another thing I want to show you guys too is the geopotential height anomaly, where we do see that there's going to be a strong amount of ridging right over the main development region. And moving forward with the forecast, or moving backwards with the forecast, we see that the ridging is just going to be a little bit too strong. So that's going to force the tropical waves to move too far southward, to the point where the Coriolis effect won't have much of an impact when it comes to the rotation, as well as developing a closed center of circulation. So we're unlikely to see tropical storm development due to that. We're going to need to wait and see when this ridge will move a little bit further northward. All depends on the position of this low pressure system to determine when the tropical waves will move further northward. And the further northward they move right over this area, then the more likely we're going to see tropical storm development, but it's unlikely, at least within the near future. So in general, taking a look back at the GFS model forecast over the next several days, we do see the tropical waves are moving too far southward, and there's not really much to take note of. We're definitely still going to need to pay close attention to the next few tropical waves that move over this area, because you never know when it comes to tropical waves like this. But I'll say it's unlikely we're going to see tropical storm development this far southward into the Caribbean, thanks to strong wind shear as well as the position of this ridge. And here are the sea surf temperatures over the northern Atlantic at this time. And for one thing is that it is very concerning, because look at the sea surf temperatures right over the Gulf of Mexico. We're seeing sea surf temperatures in some areas hit close to 90, if not slightly over 90, where portions of Key West experience sea surf temperatures over 90 degrees. And it is concerning because, of course, the warmer the sea surf temperatures are, the more likely we're going to experience a more active than usual hurricane season. So this is definitely very concerning. But another thing too is that when it comes to the possibility of tropical storm Dawn, the area where it would develop would be somewhere right here. And so for the most part, it'll most likely be over sea surf temperatures that are closer to the high 70s rather than the low 80s. So it's definitely going to need some instability between the mid-levels and the upper levels of the atmosphere to help this storm maintain its strength and potentially reach tropical storm status. It could be considered a subtropical storm due to the fact that there necessarily isn't enough latent heat surrounding the center of circulation for this to be considered a tropical entity. I'll keep you guys updated. In terms of the next few rain events you should expect over the Caribbean and Central America. So in Central America, you're going to be pounded by constant phases of rain. We're going to see multiple tropical waves move through. And for the Caribbean, you should expect an enhanced risk of thunder showers by the time we approach the Thursday timeframe right over Puerto Rico, the Leeward Islands, as well as the Dominican Republic and Haiti. So definitely pay close attention to that. We could see heavy thunderstorms right around the Friday timeframe right over Hispaniola and even into Cuba and Jamaica. Things should dry up by the weekend before we see more thunderstorm activities associated with this upper level low move into the Caribbean islands by the Sunday timeframe. It should be more isolated, however, and we won't see a more enhanced risk of rain showers until I'll say the Monday through Wednesday timeframe of next week, when we're going to see this tropical wave move through with scattered thunderstorms. So you should expect anywhere from 1 to 2 inches of rain over the next week over the Caribbean islands. And here's what the National Hurricane Center is forecasting when it comes to the possibility of tropical storm Dawn developing. We now have a medium 40% chance of this entity developing into a tropical storm. Good news is that this likely won't impact any land, so that certainly so it's won't be much of anything to worry about if you're along the East Coast or right around Bermuda. Maybe some higher surf, but that's about it. So definitely make sure to not underestimate the threat of high surf and rip currents along the coast, because that could be possible with this tropical storm. So definitely keep that in mind over the next week in right around southern Canada, Bermuda, and even as far west as the United States. So here are what the GFS Ensemble members are forecasting over the next several days. We do see that There is one or two ensemble members that want to develop a tropical storm within the next week and a half, but it's very far out, so I definitely won't take this seriously at all just yet in the Caribbean. We're gonna need to see more ensemble members say the same thing before we can confidently say this, but even that, it seems like a far-fetched prediction thanks to what we've been seeing right over the Caribbean and the main development region when it comes to the Saharan Dust, as well as the amount of wind shear. There are a decent amount of ensemble members wanting to take this close to tropical storm status, but good news is that it won't impact any land. For the northern Atlantic at this time, it doesn't seem like there's going to be much imminent threats to land when it comes to tropical storms, but make sure to watch out for enhanced rainfall right over Central America as well as the Caribbean over the next week. The European model is also, the ensemble members are also very similar to the GFS model, but they're even weaker when it comes to their forecast, with none of them really taking any low pressure system to tropical storm status, but still a lot of days to go, so I'll keep you guys updated. And here's the amount of rainfall you should expect over the next 6 days right over the Caribbean as well as portions of Central America. Portions of Central America could experience anywhere from 3 to 6 inches of rain, especially right up along the coast of Honduras, Costa Rica as well, even into Panama. Definitely watch out for heavy rain all through these areas. And even into the Caribbean, you should expect anywhere from 1 to 2 inches of rain, maybe enhanced rainfall in the higher elevations. So definitely keep that in mind, that this should begin right around the late week, right around Thursday to Friday, and then begin again between Sunday and Wednesday when it comes to scattered thunderstorms. So here's my forecast in general when it comes to the possibility of tropical storm dawn. So I will say it's a moderate chance at this point, but it's unlikely to impact land. And for much of the Caribbean and main development region, I will say that it's most likely going to be very quiet for the near future. But we're still going to watch these areas when it comes to new tropical waves moving through, because you never know, especially in the more long-term future, when conditions could become favorable in those areas. But that's it for now, guys, and I thank you guys for watching.